Ooh, what's happening, guys? Welcome to another eclectic edition of PWT Podcast. Yeah. I am your infallible host, Phil Marks, and joining me today, you guys know where to find me at prowrestletimes. You're probably already here at Wrestle Clips. None of that matters because today we have an awesome guest. He is a Forbes writer, a stand-up comedian, host of the Pro Wrestling Bits YouTube channel. At This Is Nasty on Twitter, X, Alfred Konuwa. Round of applause. Am I saying that correctly?
Thank you so much. Yes, you're saying that correctly. Honor to be here. It's a pleasure. And we were talking off air.Ose are real applause.
Yes.
Like real people are in that room applauding me right now.
There's
at least 27
audience.
People in there.
Yeah, dude, they're hanging out and they're cheering us on as we do the damn thing. So at This Is Nasty, go check them out at Pro Wrestling Bits. We play your bits sometimes, like the little snippets you upload on X on the show. And yeah, I'm just super excited to have you here, man. How's life? How are things going just in general before we get into the nonsense that is the IWC?
Well, I love to hear that, but life is great. You know, Pro Wrestling Bits that 20,000 subscribers. It's never thought that it would get that big, but you know, here we are, and I'm having the time of my life. I have the time of my life covering wrestling. I think it's the greatest thing in the world, and I'm just happy that we found a community. Very much support this channel as well. You're doing great things, and I love your point of view. And it was great to get to talk to you a couple weeks ago when we were on Marvin's podcast. So,
dude, that was
really good.
Yeah, that was such a great time, man. We were all popping each other and shit. I was like, this is great, dude. We're gonna have fun. And but yeah, well, I like your point of view too. Speaking of that, and I appreciate the way you approach the whole just covering pro wrestling, and it's sort of the way I try to do it. Now you're much more comedic and stand up, and because you do stand up, and I wanted to ask you about that because I'm a huge stand up fan personally. I try to be very funny. You know, I'm very up on the shits, old school, you know. Raw and Delirious are two of the greatest, you know, back-to-back things ever, pieces of media ever made. Yes, and then you fast forward today and there's shows I like to enjoy like every day, you know, like Kill Tony and things like that. So what made you start doing stand-up? Like when and why?
It's funny because I was writing for Bleacher Report a few years ago, actually. And so they started to go digital and do web series. Right. And they wanted me to do a web show about wrestling. And the idea that I thought up is it's going to be like Weekend Update, but for wrestling. So I'll have like these headlines that are from the dirt sheets or whatever, but then I'll come up with a funny twist. That's what the show ended up being. But at first, it was like me just ranting about these wrestling storylines and these wrestling headlines. And I would watch it back like, this isn't funny at all. Like, it's just me ranting. I'm not being funny. I need to like tell jokes and stuff like that, but I didn't know how to tell a joke. Like I didn't know how to tell a joke like on command and be able to effectively write a joke. So the first couple of episodes in, I just didn't like it. I personally didn't like it, but they were getting great views and they're like, hey, we're going to keep this going. And so I decided that in order for me to not embarrass myself, at least for me, I was going to learn how to at least write a joke. So I got a book. It was like actually, I'm staring at it right now. It was like the Idiot's Guide to Writing a Joke or something like that. And then there was a yellow book that I got about writing jokes. So I read and I realized that there's an actual process to writing jokes. There's like setup, punchline, rule of threes. There's different types of puns and malaprops or whatever. And I just immediately became obsessed with writing jokes, just knowing that there is a technical aspect to it. So what I would do is I would just get up in the morning and I would just practice by writing like topical headlines based on the news. I would go to Google Science and then Google Sports and Google Politics, whatever. And I'll just write like 3 to 4 funny, what I thought were funny, pretty funny, whatever, jokes about what was going on. And it got me to start getting into writing like wrestling jokes. And so that's how I just kind of took to joke writing. And after the show ended, after a year or two, which was a very fun show, WWE WTF, but it ended. And then I kept deciding to just keep writing jokes. Like I had already gotten in a routine that every morning I get up in the morning and write jokes. So I did that. And then the jokes turned in from topical to writing about myself and what happened to me that day. And then I decided, wow, I should try stand up. And then, you know, the rest is history. I went to the Comedy Store open mic on a Sunday. I bombed. First time ever doing comedy. Bombed horribly. And the thing is, like, most people do well on their first time because it's like, the art of comedy is making it sound like it's coming out for the first time. So when you're doing comedy for the first time, it is coming out for the first time. So it kind of helps So most people, at least most of my comedian friends, say they did well on their first time and then bombed a bunch. But me, I completely shit the bed the first time I did stand up. But like the masochist in me, and this is how I knew I was a comedian, is that like I bombed, but I was like, wow, like I'm gonna try that again. Like I just bombed like a real comedian. I'll be back, I'll be back tomorrow.
It's like a sickness, dude.
Like most people, like if you fall out of a plane, you break every bone. You're like, I'm never getting into a plane again. I'm never jumping out of a plane. But a comedian will be in the hospital in a body cast. Like, man, when my bones heal up, I'm getting back on that goddamn plane.
Yeah. It's like how Dave Chappelle explains it. It sort of applies to all artistry. I'd say there's like a void in a comedian's soul, though, and it can only be filled by like the sickness of having to like go up there and eat shit and then lick your wounds and come back and try it again. It's like, I don't know. It's what makes people great. And you're absolutely great at what you do. Do you ever mix in, like, do you do like pro wrestling bits as far as like in your stand up? Do you try and mix in like topical
100%?
Yeah, like punchlines to do with like, oh, Kane, whatever,
yeah. And this might be a little bit of a scoop or whatnot, but I don't think I've ever talked about this before. Like my kind of long-term plan, like I'm definitely going to put a stand-up special on my YouTube channel and whatnot as I continue to grow my following and, sell it to somebody, hopefully. But I think the move is, at least the first time I try this, it's going to be all wrestling jokes. Because over the years, I've compiled at least 30 minutes of wrestling jokes that just based on like, when I'd watch wrestling, my parents wouldn't let me watch it. So I would watch at my parents' house. Then I would change the channel. So they always catch me watching I Love Lucy. So they thought I was this huge I Love Lucy fan. So there's jokes like that. But I've got a ton of jokes about wrestling. And I want to do a stand-up special, all wrestling jokes. And because that will appeal to my audience. If I just do stand-up for the sake of stand-up, it's probably not going to hook as many of my core audience as possible. So I want to just start with doing stand-up about wrestling and then kind of move from there. But yeah, I definitely have a bunch of jokes about wrestling in my stand-up.
That's a great idea, and it's very unique because nobody's really done that, I don't think. So that's a great idea. And so when let's say you bring like a wrestling joke to just like a cold audience, you don't know who's going to be there, let's say, do they receive it typically well, or are those the ones where you're kind of like, oh, it's hit or miss, and then...
The great thing about wrestling is it's a lot of fun to explain to people who don't watch wrestling. Like if they watch wrestling, that's a little bit of a bonus, but it's even more fun if they don't watch wrestling and you're like, one of my jokes is just me explaining The Godfather. Like it doesn't even need a punchline, but I punched it up and whatnot. But the first time I would do that joke, it was just me explaining The Godfather's entrance. And people were like dying because they've never seen this before, but I'm describing this pimp who would like go into the back and he'd come out magically with 4 more hoes. He's like Houdini, and he'd come out and I'm just like describing that, like kids are in the crowd and they're singing along to like, we pimp these hoes, what I'm saying? Man. The hoe train and stuff. So like me describing wrestling angles to people who don't watch wrestling is just as fun. And then if I do kind of go in depth about a wrestling angle, I'll usually pick like wrestlers who everybody knows. Like you guys know Randy Savage, right? You guys know Stone Cold. But a lot of my wrestling jokes are things that people could relate to, because like one of them, like the one I just talked about me not being allowed to watch wrestling, everybody could relate to that. There's always a show to kids growing up that they couldn't watch until they like snuck around to watch it. And for some people that's porn, So like I try to make it to where either it's relatable to a crowd in terms of my experience. Yeah, it has to do with wrestling, but it's either relatable in terms of the experience I had with wrestling, or it's about a wrestler who's so famous like The Rock or Stone Cold or Hulk Hogan that like everybody's going to know.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's I've always found that fascinating. And so like, who were your comedic inspirations, let's say? So you actually have like a very cool way of how you just described that you even got into stand-up. I think a lot of people are like, oh, you're funny, you should go try this, is usually like the typical story. You were like, oh, I gotta try this sort of to get funnier, and then you sort of fell in love with it. And but like growing up, you weren't allowed to watch wrestling, but were you allowed to watch comedy, or was there anybody that now when you look back you're like, yeah, they really influenced me?
Absolutely. Well, my family loved Chris Rock, and he's my favorite comedian. We would, whenever we'd have long trips, we just put Chris Rock in the car, and I love Rock. Pretty much all of his specials memorized, but it never gets old because he's so funny. Yeah. So Chris Rock, Eddie, you mentioned Eddie Murphy, loved Eddie Murphy. Louis C.K. is actually the guy who influenced me, now that I look back on it, to do stand-up. I love Louis C.K. The thing about Louis, I would watch the show Louis, and like whenever I would watch stand-up before that, it's like they're on this big stage and there's all this pyrotechnics going off for their special, and it's like they're these larger than life superstars. So I just looked at it stand up like, wow, like I could never do that. I wouldn't put myself in the same category. But when I would see Louis C.K. do stand up on his TV show, which is one of the greatest TV shows ever, he presented it in a way that just, it was like he was working out material. It was like the opposite of Seinfeld, which I like Seinfeld, but if you watch the Jerry Seinfeld show, like it's just him doing stand up, but it's so produced and it looks fake. It doesn't look like he's even in a real comedy club. Louis C.K. is legitimately in the Comedy Cellar, like working out material, and just something about watching that felt so raw. And I was just like, man, like that looks like fun. Like he looks like he's just having fun telling jokes. And that's what originally got the wheels turning, because this was around the time when I was writing jokes, and I was just writing. I never thought of myself as like a stand-up, but I was just writing jokes. And that's when I started thinking like, man, maybe I could do something like that, because he made it look like it was so much fun. And Louis is just so funny.
He is, man. He's one of the best. And some of his appearances with like Patrice O'Neill on the Opie and Anthony show back in the day. Oh man,
Bill Burr. I would listen to hours of that.
Me too. I could throw it on YouTube anytime, fall asleep to it, wake up. Like, you know, it's one of my go-tos is I'll just type in like Louis C.K. O-N-A and I've listened to the same bits probably 1,000 times. But yeah, his stand-up's great. I didn't get too much into the actual Louis show, but I am familiar with it.
Yeah, it's a great show, man. And Louis just makes a lot of great content. He's got the show called Horace and Pete. That was excellent. It's very dark. So I just kind of warn you up front. Excellent show. And then Chappelle. I love Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, Dave Chappelle's one of the absolute goats. So the Chappelle show was like growing. That was like my all-time when I was young. I think I was in like grade 8 watching that, you know, grade 7 or 8 or something watching. That was one of the all-time great shows. But you mentioned Chris Rock. So what do you think? I guess like this is a little side note, but what do you think of like his latest special? You know, a lot of people kind of shit on it. They're like, oh, he flubbed up the last line and it was like a live performance though. I don't know. I loved it. I thought it was great and it was well needed. It's not his best special of all time, but I thought it was awesome, but a lot of people shit on it. What was your take on it?
I thought it was great. I mean, we do live in this era of like negativity where you can see people shitting on everything, but I thought he did a good job as a self-contained Chris Rock special. It was a very good special. I will say this, like I was let down by the special because the energy in the room, like, part of being a comedian is reading the room, and nobody knows that better than Chris Rock. Like, I'm not here to lecture him or give advice, but like the energy in the room, everywhere Chris Rock went, was Will Smith slapped the shit out of you, and we all saw it. Yeah. And he refused to, like, when he was on tour, his ticket sales doubled because this happened. So these are people who want to come in there, and yes, I understand Chris Rock's working on his new hour, but it's like, my guy, like, you need to be riffing on Will Smith. You need to just be like, even if it's not going to be in your new hour, spend the first 10 minutes shitting on Will Smith, shitting on Jada. By the end of the tour, you probably have a great closing bit. But he refused to address that when he was on tour. The first thing he would even say is like, I'm not going to address the slap. And then he'd go into a stand-up. And it's like, this thing happened to you and you're pretending like it didn't, which would make it more awkward. And he did the same thing in his live special, which, again, it's a live special. And this is how I feel about Cat Williams' live special. It's like you're on live Netflix because they're expecting you to shit on people. Like that's why they signed the deal. Cat Williams went viral for shitting on all these comedians. Netflix gives him a live stand-up deal. And I was like, oh man, I cannot wait to watch that. I wonder what he's going to say. If you thought Club Shay Shay was bad, I wonder what he's going to say about everybody else. And he did it. It was just like a Cat Williams special. Same with Chris Rock. So I think that hurt the special. And I think that's why so many people were frustrated. Because I really wanted it. Honestly, I wanted it to be like 60 minutes of him just shitting on Will Smith. I would have taken that, but he took the high road. I thought he told some great jokes. I just thought this special should have been the Will Smith special. It's just, given what happened, this is one of the biggest moments ever in entertainment. And like the comedian, he didn't say anything in the moment at the Oscars. He didn't say anything on his special until the end. And I really thought he had a great opportunity to just create some awesome art.
Yeah, no, I agree with you a lot there. And yeah, you brought up Cat Williams, that woke folks special, man. That was shits, man. That was awful. And I love Cat Williams, dude, but I thought that was bad. Did you, we're just getting into comedy, but did you watch the Tom Brady roast on Netflix? Did you? Okay, so I watched the live version. I rewatched the edited version. I can confirm, like, what I noticed was edited was they just edited Kim's shit. They edited it down and then put like cheers in there where she was getting booed. So the live version is, I think, only like 3 minutes longer. That's all they edited on the edited version, in case anybody caught that or was curious. That was at least through my little analytical scope. man, that roast I think was phenomenal, and I think it was much needed in the current climate of comedy, where there's a billion podcasts that already talk about this, and we're gonna get into wrestling. Don't worry, folks. But it's just with the whole, like, quote unquote, you want to call it cancel culture or whatever, just people getting in trouble, scared to talk about certain subjects, etc. And I just thought that roast was really well needed. It was timely. I thought everyone killed it. Like, even like Julian Edelman fucking killed it, and then killed Tony Hinchcliffe. I call him Tony all the time. But Tony Hinchcliffe absolutely body bagged. Nikki Glaser, I'm not like the hugest fan, but she destroyed it too. Bert Kreischer, Tom Segura, they were a little cringe. But what were your thoughts, I guess, on the roast, and just like who really stood out to you?
I mean, I loved it. I thought Tony Hinchcliffe was just a monster, and I'm friendly with Tony. I've he used to live here in LA before he went to Austin. I did kill Tony one time, and Bill Burr was on it.
Wow.
And like, just to see him, he has been a great roaster for the longest time. I used to do roast battle at the belly room of the Comedy Store, and he was like a routine judge there at the roast battle. And just to see the way he did his roast is the opposite of Bert and Tom, because Bert and Tom get shit on a lot, but I think they're funny.
I think they're funny.
But they had this like prepared, and they even talked about it on their podcast in terms of Tom was like, when he kind of felt the energy of the room, he's like, we're going to bomb. Like, this is not like everybody's out here roasting and killing, and we're going to do this prepared kind of speech about Tom Brady that it just didn't click. And I just thought, at least Tom Segura, if you let him loose, he would have destroyed Tom Brady. But Tony Hinchcliffe did the opposite, where he's sitting at a table with Dana White, and you think that it's just like a cutaway, like a refresher. And then Tony just gets up from his seat and starts walking around, just roasting everybody one by one, like with this big dick energy. And it was just like, oh, not only was it cool to watch him do that with all that swagger, but the jokes he was telling were next level. There were silly jokes. There were puns. The all hell no.
All hell no's on the pussy. Oh joke. My God, dude.
It was just like a force of nature. And until, like, I agree with you about Nikki Glaser. Nikki Glaser just bodied everybody. It took a couple people to follow her. But when Tony Hinchcliffe did that, like, it was unbelievable. And I thought Andrew Schultz did a really good job. His writing is great, but he would have done much better in terms of response had he gone before Tony Hinchcliffe, because Tony Hinchcliffe just ended that.
Yeah, that was phenomenal. And the reason to circle it to wrestling, the reason I bring that up is because I think with the WWE Netflix deal and with The Rock being all involved, I think the next move is the roast of The Rock. I think that, right? Did I just come up with that shit right here? I think that's next up. You know what I mean? That's the move. I think it would draw a lot of attention. Who can follow Tom Brady and who's willing to take the piss? And I don't know, man. I think The Rock could do it. Man. Yeah, that's
I'd love that. And you know what? Like, I don't know if you get this, but like, I get these lines about certain things. Usually it's about wrestling lines, but I'm pretty friendly with the guy, this guy, Jimmy Shapiro. He sends out betting lines for the different pay-per-views for wrestling. And I cover it sometimes for Forbes, but he started to send me lines for other stuff that haven't been released yet. So right after the Tom Brady roast, he sent me lines for who's going to get roasted next, what celebrity. Right. And LeBron James is number one. Like, he's the audio favorite. But I believe The Rock was on that list too. And I don't think he was that low on the list. I think he was like in the top 5 or something like that. So you saying that, like, that could be the move. I would love to see that. Yeah. And it's funny you bring up, that's a great tie-in with WWE Netflix, because my next pro wrestling bit dropping tomorrow at 11 a.m. And if you see, it's about cancel culture. And I go pretty far in the bit, and I could just sense it's going to be one of those bits that causes a lot of consternation, even among my own audience.
I can't wait.
But it's about cancel culture, and I pretty much conclude, because of the Tiffany Stratton thing that happened, that caused a lot of conversation about cancel culture. But I really do feel that we've entered this new era of like the end of cancel culture. And I think that Netflix special was like, if we look back a year or two from now and people are not getting canceled the way they were, and the way we're used to them getting canceled, we're going to look back at this Netflix special like this was the moment where everybody said, okay, fuck it. We're going to do a roast of Tom Brady. We're going to tell jokes about trans people, black people, gay people, everything. Nobody's off limits. From that point on, like, WWE's going to go into Netflix. They're not going to be TVPG. And I think we're going to get this new culture where it's like, we're over cancel culture, because that's inevitably going to happen. But I do think that the tipping point for that is going to be that roast of Tom Brady. And the roast of The Rock, my goodness.
Yeah,
like, I think The Rock is a great sport, and I think he'd be open to it. But I would love to see the roast of The Rock.
Yeah, I would too. And the culture behind the scenes. So I'm a script writer. I don't know if you knew that. Like, that's
awesome.
what I fucking do. Yeah. So behind the scenes of things, it's a lot less. It's more like back how it used to be. I don't know how to word it. Yeah, it's less. People are less worried about, we're going to get canceled and we have to, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I feel like it is shifting, like you're saying. I agree with that fully. And I agree with that roast being, because like the last couple roasts before that were really kind of tame in comparison, I guess. So so I agree with that. But also, fuck you, Kim K, for editing that. We're getting that edited, motherfucker.
But yeah, I did not see it live, which I regret.
It wasn't any. The only difference was that Kim just really got booed. But then
I did see that clip.
Great about her performance was she kind of won the crowd back by sticking to the prompter and just doing her goddamn thing.
Yeah,
that I think would have looked better for her than them just editing around and editing cheers in. I think that's just so, especially when we already know that you got booed. So I just think that was dumb on her part, but whatever, man. Women don't pay attention to that shit, and that's who pays attention to her. So we talked about Forbes before and writing, and obviously I'm a writer, and so you write for Forbes, right?
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you about that as well. Like, how did that come about? And tell me, like, how did it come about that you started writing for Forbes, I guess?
So when I was with Bleacher Report, I had an editor, and she was really great in terms of understanding wrestling and being able to either pitch stories, or I would pitch stories and she would understand where I was going with it, and she'd be able to make them better in terms of suggesting certain things and whatnot. And that's pretty rare in the sports world, as somebody who's an editor who likes wrestling, because so many of my editors, even to this day, they say, well, I don't know anything about wrestling, so you're off on your own, which I'm fine. I'm fine being off on my own, but it does help my work to have somebody invested in wrestling. And she was. So she was my first editor, Bailey, and she worked for Bleacher Report. So we would kind of bounce ideas off each other for wrestling content. And then Forbes saw what Bleacher Report was doing and wanted to create its own version of that. They wanted to create a sports imprint where you just kind of, you're just on there talking about wrestling, and you have these kind of freelance writers talking about wrestling or talking about all kinds of different sports. So they brought her on, and she suggested we need to do a wrestling arm, because at Bleacher Report, even though the NFL is the most popular sport, nothing touches wrestling in terms of the viewership, because the wrestling audience is very underserved. So when she went to Forbes, she pitched me, unbeknownst to me, she pitched me as like, there's this guy that I work with that, we should have on Forbes. I think he'd be great. So she reached out to me. She DM'd me and said, like, hey, I just started at Forbes and I'd love for you to join the team. And, it was kind of a no-brainer, because, the editors that I would have at Bleacher Report, even the editors today, because she's not there anymore, I really do appreciate having an editor who knows about like wrestling, and nothing against these editors. Wrestling is a very kind of underground, how it is.
Yeah.
It's starting to come back to the mainstream now, but for so long, it's just this thing where not everybody watches it, that's not at its peak, or at least it hasn't been until recently. So it really did help having somebody who knew about wrestling. And so I just kind of trusted her, and I followed her to Forbes.
And you've done some really cool things. Like, I believe you interviewed Tony Khan was that for Forbes, or was that
during
for
Better Days? No, that was for Forbes. That was a pretty good interview. It was all right. It's funny because
it was great. Yeah, it was a great interview. Yeah. I love Alfred, and maybe we'll hire him, but maybe not. He better be nice to me. Huh?
yeah, man. Let's fucking go. So like we had a pretty good interview, what I would consider a good interview. And it's funny because I'm kind of painted in this brush as like an AEW hater, which whatever you want to say about me, say about me.
Me too, man. I get it.
That's how they are. This is part of the downfall of AEW right now, and I'm not wishing death on them or anything, but I think one of the things that really hurts AEW is that audience gets so offended when you criticize them. And people like you and I, they need people like we are somebody that they need to be putting their arms around, because we watch the product. We engage with the product. Okay, yeah, the things we have to say about it aren't all that great, but I mean, now you've got some of these AEW like loyalists who are now turning on the product for things that we've been saying for years.
JD from NY.
he's now adjusting his clan's robe to talk about AEW. He's got a whole out of his mouth to talk about AEW. So yes, even he's sitting on his clan's horse from 10 feet above, talking about AEW. And a lot of people are now shitting on AEW, but like this is what's been happening. It's just like it's. And I say this because I was once on great terms with AEW. It's so funny how things turn in terms of like AEW was going head to head with NXT, and I had nothing but good things to say about AEW. I loved AEW. Yeah. And I would report every week. I would write articles about, because I covered the entire Wednesday Night Wars. And every week all but like 5 or 6 weeks, AEW beat NXT. And so I would write these out, and the WWE people would get pissed off. It's the same thing that's happening now, but in reverse. Like WWE people would get mad and make their excuses, but like WWE product in 2019 was shit. Like McMahon was at his worst. I called it the senile era, and it was like a horrible product. And now the shoe's on the other foot. And now that I'm just saying what's happening, that WWE is way better. They're making more money than ever. AEW is falling down the tubes. They have no leadership. All this stuff that is true. Like now it's AEW took all their access away from me, which I do not care about. But they used to give me everybody. I interviewed Kenny Omega. I interviewed Jericho. I interviewed Tony Khan, as you know. I interviewed AEW's biggest stars, Darby Allin. But then once I saw, and it wasn't even when AEW was going down. I just started to notice, as a black man, I'm one of the few people who covers wrestling from a black standpoint. Like before anything else, I'm going to look at wrestling as a black wrestling analyst, not observer. Fuck that. Yeah. As a black wrestling analyst.
Gimmick infringement.
Yeah. God, I almost put him over. But the thing is, I came out, the turn for AEW happened when I did this article, and it was about like, boy, I would really like to see more black people on AEW TV. I didn't say that to be woke or like diversity and all that stuff.
No, I get it. Yeah.
I said it because black people are cool. And black people are the key to cool. And if if you find out how to write for some of this black talent that I know is talented on your roster, the Keith Lees at the time, like Swerve Strickland wasn't there yet, but he was, on his way there. And there was so much black talent that was there that was not being used. My thing was just like AEW is becoming this like indie underground thing that's really going to separate, and they're going to go down the tubes if they rely on this. You need to start booking black people. And of course they took it as, he thinks AEW is racist. And then they got so petty with me. And I think this is hilarious. So there's this media library where you get the pictures for AEW, right? So when I'm writing articles, I could just go, it's just a password that you enter, you get the media pictures and you put them on your articles and stuff.
Right.
Same thing as using Google. It's really not that different. It's just like one less step.
I've worked with it. Yeah, I've read columns and stuff, and I've had access to things similar to that. So yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So the day after I put that article, the video out about all elite white people, and I'm making fun of them, and just kind of, I'm trying to kind of push I'm using comedy to over exaggerate a problem that they did have, that there's not a lot of black talent on TV. The day after I came out with that article, they took away my media access to this library. Like they had to change the password just because of little old me so that everybody else can get access except me. So it's like, you can't even look at our pictures anymore. That's how mad they were at me. It's like, I can get these pictures. I just have to Google them. But like, so it's fine. Like I'm not a guy who goes out here because I need access or anything like that. I just want to cover wrestling to, hang out with people like you, to where we can just kind of joke around about it and have fun doing it.
Right. And to tie in the wrestling and the comedy aspect, it's like that's what jokes and comedy is supposed to do. Is we highlight the funny shit or the stereotype or the thing that is like the funniest shit is always like the stuff that everybody does every day, but like somebody words it in a way where like you didn't think of it or you couldn't like say it that way. I know you know what I'm trying to say here.
Yes, absolutely.
Those are the funniest bits when someone just points out like the simplest thing that everyone does, but they explain it in a way where you're like, or they, use an analogy or however. But that's like my approach too. Like earlier you brought up, you were like, I want to be like weekend update of wrestling, right? I got into like an argument with SRS back in the day, and that's like,
who hasn't?
Yeah. And that's what I told him. I'm like, no, like he's telling me to retract. He's in my YouTube comments telling me to retract things. I'm like, no. I'm not the news, bro. Like I'm SNL, you're CNN. Like, let's get that straightened out. Like I make jokes about this shit and I'm just being funny. And you are like trying to be taken credible as like a news source. So I think I agree with you that we have to laugh about some of this shit. If the tribalism and all that's going to go away, we got to poke fun. We have to be objectively true to what you said. You started being objective about AEW, and I'm a diehard like you as far as AEW. I watch it all even to this day, and it's like early on as well, I started sort of falling off the wagon. Not early on, but it was just like a few years deep, and I really feel like that pandemic era, they just fell off so hard, and then when they came out of that, you just saw that Tony didn't have like his best storylines ready and waiting. He's still just doing matches. And it's like, okay, dude, you used up that goodwill that we gave you at the start where you could kind of get away with just doing really good matches or whatever. And Yeah, like you said, WWE was in the shits, and then they start to turn it around, and then AEW sort of trending the other way, and then it just seems like coping, attacking, excuses, conspiracy theories to justify everything. I was listening to 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff and Conrad Thompson. Yeah, and shout them out, and I was listening to them today, and they're talking about how or they were reading an excerpt of Dave, and we'll get to Dave in a moment here, but Dave's talking about, he's blaming, like, they're talking about WCW in 2000, right? And Dave can point to everything: bad leadership, they're losing money, the show doesn't do good ratings, no one star can carry the show on their own, doesn't matter who goes there. It's literally what the fuck is happening right now with AEW, but now Dave has every excuse. Oh, the hockey game's on. Oh, on PlayStation View, there was more viewers. I had people in my chat going, dude, I have a PlayStation. I don't even know what the fuck PlayStation View is. So he's just a dummy. And it just feels like there's so much cope and seething. I like that term, but just so much cope constantly. And that, to me, I think, I don't know. I think that's why they get the reaction is so like heated towards people like you or I, even though we do sort of toe that line when it comes to AEW, because I just feel like now they're like hornets backed into a corner, or is that a right term? I don't know. They're just backed in a corner. They're stinging.
That is a perfect analogy for what they are, right? They've always kind of been like hornets, but like now that they're backed into a corner, it's just getting loony. And I will say, just to go on the record, I have no problem with tribalism. Everybody tries to pretend like they hate tribalism. They want to be fair. And it's so funny because the same AEW fans will call people tribal, but they'll get into their tribe to call somebody else tribal.
I know.
Not having the self-awareness to know that that's tribal in and of itself. And I have no problem with that. Like, the tribal mentality is going to happen no matter what. At the end of the day, if you take a step back, we cover silly circus professional wrestling.
Yeah, dude.
It's okay to have tribalism there. Just like being a Packers guy that I hate the Bears. Doesn't mean I want the Bears to go out of business. I hate the Bears. Like, I want to see the Packers beat the Bears. That's tribalism. And so, like, this idea that you shouldn't be tribal, it's ridiculous. Like, people can have their favorites and have tribalism, and that's perfectly fine. So, like, I've never really had all that problem with tribalism. You look at politics. If you want to be president of this country, the most important job in America, if you want to be the president and the leader of free world, what is the first thing you have to do?
Yeah, pick a side, bro.
What step do you claim? Are you Democrat? Are you Republican? Do you believe in God? Do you not believe in God? Do you have a dog? Are you married? Are you gay or are you straight? Are you pro-life or are you pro-choice? You have to pick like 18 different tribes to be the leader in this country. Yet, like, we can't do that in fake professional wrestling.
I know. It's crazy. And especially when the whole idea is, even like within WWE itself, they try to promote like, well, Raw versus Smack. Yeah, Raw's going to battle SmackDown, and the winner's going to get to hang out with me and God. Just don't check my text messages, please. You can come with me on the plane, but you have to bring kittens. So I'm going to bring kittens to all my friends, and one puppy. Only one puppy allowed. Sorry. So speaking of Forbes, sorry, you took a lot of people when Forbes evaluated AEW at $2 billion. I had a lot of people being like, wasn't that Alfred who wrote that? And I was like, no, dude. I was like, no, dude, he makes fucking jokes. He's not doing financial Shark Tank, Mark Cuban fucking valuations. So I was like, no, dude, definitely not. But what did you make of that when they were valued at like $2 billion? Were you like, come on, or was it, you're just like,
That's definitely high, but the thing about valuations, it's not real money. It's what you can prove. And I watch, you mentioned Shark Tank. It's funny because I watch a lot of Shark Tank. And the thing is, somebody will say my valuation is this, and the argument and the bargaining comes down to, well, how come you think your company's worth that? It costs you $20 to make one of those things. That's going to take your valuation out. So I'm going to buy your company for this much, or I'll invest at this valuation. And at the end, it's usually a lower valuation, but like, this is like AEW. I'm sure their PR team is behind some of this in terms of some of the information that was provided to make people think that it's a $2 billion valuation. Okay, great. They got valued at $2 billion.
Yeah.
If people believe that it's worth $2 billion, it's worth $2 billion. But if AEW goes to sell, that's the only real time we're going to know what the real valuation is.
Right.
And I do think that if AEW wanted to sell its company today, I don't think they're getting $2 billion for it.
No, me neither. Yeah. But it's just, it triggered so many people, and I'm like, who gives a shit? Do you know what valuation means? It's just a fucking number. Like,
it's a number.
Yeah, my Twitter's worth 7 billion. It doesn't mean it is. Okay, well, we're kind of shitting on AEW, and I bring it up all the time. Like there's when I shit on WWE, people just don't get outraged about it. But let's take a minute here, and I want to ask you, can you name like 3 positives about AEW?
Oh, absolutely. I think the wrestling is great.
It's great.
If you watch an AEW show, you're going to get great wrestling, but that's also a double-edged sword. We always knew there would be great wrestling, and great wrestling nowadays, everybody's got great wrestling. WWE without Vince has now gone up to the level where their wrestling stands up to AEW. A 63-year-old man isn't giving them imaginary stars, but their wrestling holds up to AEW. So if you're a great wrestling in a landscape of great wrestling, what do you really have? So the wrestling is great. Okay, so that's a positive. I don't want to get too negative. I'll say another positive is their pay-per-views almost don't miss. I love their pay-per-views. I don't think I've paid for just about every pay-per-view for AEW I've watched, and I almost never get disappointed. Sometimes there's an ending that lets me down, or the main event isn't as good as I thought it was, but they produce high-quality pay-per-views. And another is that I will say they're selling out. Like, they were able to fill up Wembley Stadium. That's a great thing. They had CM Punk, and they had a lot of big stars, and they were a little hotter. But no, not just any wrestling company could fill up Wembley Stadium. That is something that, whether AEW lives or dies, it's going to be like WCW in the Georgia Dome, where I believe they almost sold out the Georgia Dome for Goldberg winning that world title. So there is a lot of good for AEW, and this is one of the reasons why it is so frustrating to see them do so bad. And a lot of that falls on Tony Khan as a booker, in that I don't think he's really doing a good job as booking, and I think he's got all this talent, but it's like watching Steve Wilkes coach the Green Bay Packers or something like that. Like, he's this great team, but you got the wrong coach in there. Sorry that Steve Wilkes caught astray, but it's like having the wrong coach on a very talented team. And once you fire that coach and you bring in some adult in the room, this is what happened. Like the Cleveland Browns is what they are. Once the Browns brought in Kevin Stefanski, they became a playoff contender because they had a lot of talent. But when they had, another coaching staff, and they had one failing coaching staff after another, they didn't know what to do with them.
Oh no, everything's great here, man. Great. We're doing a great job. It's all great matches. Soda water, please.
You're doing a great job, Tony.
Yeah. Okay, and then let's we'll flip it on its ear. What is 3 cons, or give me what is like 1 or 2 cons about WWE right now? Negatives about WWE. Give me like 2.
I could give you 3. I'll tell you, they're in a post-WrestleMania.
Give me 3 negatives about WWE.
They're in a post-WrestleMania lull right now, and which is bound to happen. It happens every year. I really do think that I very much enjoyed this King and Queen of the Ring tournament, even though it has been a little cursed. I've liked the matches. I've liked the kind of storytelling, and I like the fact that they're using this tournament to help. It very much reminds me of the Attitude Era, where you have multiple rivalries. You see it with LA Knight, where he's going to face Tama Tonga of the Bloodline, but he's also got something going with Logan Paul, where they tease that. He's also got something going. Yeah. He's also got something going with Carmelo Hayes, where they tease that. So he's in 3 rivalries at once. But I will say the post-WrestleMania lull is just kind of uninspiring for WWE. It's obviously not as hot as it was during WrestleMania, but I think inevitably they're going to get to there. I will say that I'm not a great big fan of Raw right now in particular. It's a long show. They do have a lot of good moments, but WrestleMania season, I would say the last few months of WrestleMania season leading up to Raw, the past couple of years, like, they would have incredible angles where the Bloodline was red hot. Raw did not feel like a 3-hour show. But now that Cody's finished the story and we're now building new stories, it definitely does feel like a 3-hour show. It helps that they have a lot of wrestling through the King and Queen of the Ring, so that kind of makes it go by quicker. But it's back to feeling like Raw, so it's not my favorite thing. And then I will say, to kind of hint to what I'm going to be talking about tomorrow, is this whole Tiffany Stratton thing doesn't have me feeling all of that warm and fuzzy right now, because I do think, I want to make it very clear that I think that this was a misunderstanding, I hope, with Tiffany Stratton. When I first saw what happened, I figured, like, she must have not heard the sound. This must be a misunderstanding. But I also didn't want to just give her the benefit of the doubt. I was also all ears to hear, well, we're going to hear what happened. Like, I need to hear from Tiffany Stratton. Why did this racist sound end up on your timeline, allegedly? Was it even real? And then WWE responded by saying, Tiffany Stratton is a valued member of this team and management loves her. The end.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like everybody moved on.
Yeah.
And this real journalist, Dave Meltzer, fresh off of giving a lecture to all these journalists about how we need to be asking real questions, all that bullshit, he's not made a peep about this. And it's like, wait a goddamn minute. Okay, yeah, I'm sure management loves Tiffany Stratton. Okay, what does this have anything to do about that clip that was posted? They didn't say anything about this.
No.
They didn't say, well, this was just a mistake. Tiffany didn't hear the sound. Tiffany, this, that, and the third. I just want to hear an explanation. We talk about cancel culture. I do not want Tiffany Stratton canceled. Okay, if this was something that she posted and she thought it was funny to call somebody a black bitch, she's young, immature. I'm not down with it. She's going to have to prove herself or whatever. But I want to hear something. I want to hear either it was a mistake, either this, that, the third. But it just seems like they're trying to sweep this under the rug. And that does not sit well with me as a black person who watches wrestling.
Yeah, no.
You know what I mean? Who loves Jade Cargill. And even if I didn't, I need to hear some sort of explanation from Tiffany Stratton as to what happened here.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure, to me, the way I thought about it was I'm sure she wouldn't do that knowing she had to go to work and get hands from Jade and Bianca the next day. I'm sure there's a mistake. But yeah, it is weird, actually. I didn't even think about that. Nobody really talked about it. It just kind of went away. We talked about it on the podcast. I know I did. And I don't know. I just think that maybe she didn't hear it. That could be my only explanation. I think she's too... I don't know. I really don't know. Yeah, it'd be awesome if somebody could just provide some insight onto it a little bit, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, that's we've been talking a lot about AEW and stuff like that. So we're gonna venture into what's called Phil Marks bookmarks here. And we've been kind of clowning on Tony Khan, but we got to keep that going.
A lot of people sent me this one today.
Okay, yeah. So I was seeing this on Twitter. We're just gonna react to some stuff and then we'll talk about Meltzer. But at Awful Wrestling, good friend of the show, yes. He tweets out or X's out and says, "Don't talk to me about how ratings aren't important. Either Tony is jumping for joy about the Collision rating, as you can see. Pardon me, I'm dyslexic as fuck. But wait till Thursday." So Tony Khan, it's a screenshot. He says, "We celebrate the 5-year anniversary of AEW this Sunday. AEW Dynamite pay-per-view. This past Saturday, AEW Collision on TNT had the biggest audience since September 2023. It's great news. I was wondering where the Fast Nationals were." So Tony's feeling spicy. He's taking shots.
Taking a shot at the king.
Yeah, dude. See you all for the go home show. So, goddamn, man, what are your thoughts, Alfred, about Tony Khan's little, he's feeling peppy?
Listen, I have no problem with it. Is he not supposed to celebrate this? And if you look at the comments, he's just getting cooked in the comments. But that's what a promoter is supposed to do. And the thing about Tony Khan that I think is one of AEW's biggest Achilles heels is that Tony Khan is just too nice of a guy, too much of kind of a dork. And he doesn't take enough of this kind of pride in his product, in that I need him to be celebrating this more. I need him to be more of a carny. He can't just be this nice guy who's in the middle. Wrestling is not a business built for nice people, especially when it comes to the promoter. Okay, now there are a lot of great people in wrestling. You do get a lot of people who are just good people, good classic good guys. Titus O'Neil is an example of probably the greatest guy in wrestling. Yeah. Having said that, the promoters in wrestling, I mean, there's no other way to say it. You just have to have that dog in you in a bad way. You just can't be this soft, let CM Punk walk all over you. If you want to manage some of these big stars with their enormous egos, you have to be kind of an asshole. And so this rings as kind of dorky with Tony Khan in terms of, I like that he's being a promoter in promoting his product and saying and celebrating and stuff like that. But I want to see more of the promoter side in terms of him being a cold-blooded killer. And I do think that will come if AEW is able to last. That will come with more years of experience, more cynicism. And I thought it was funny, that Fast Nationals thing. For those people who don't know, and this is Tony's problem, is that he says these things like everybody knows what he's talking about. 90% of people don't know what Fast Nationals are, but the Fast Nationals are basically the viewership that comes out early on. So on the weekends for Rampage, the Fast Nationals will come out and they'll say, this is an estimate number of what Rampage does. And I'll get these Fast Nationals through back channels, coincidentally, when AEW's numbers are kind of down, And I just, whether they're up or down, sometimes they're up. There's a lot of times where like AEW will be on an all-star weekend, so their fast nationals will be inflated because there's a lot of markets that carried AEW and carry that number, whatever. So whether they're up, sometimes they're down, but I send out the fast nationals, and when they do bad, people freak out and they don't like it. And Tony Khan, we've had some conversations privately, and I won't get into that, but let's just say Tony Khan's not a big fan.
Okay.
Tony Khan's not a big fan of these fast nationals. I will just say that. Okay? So him saying that was like a shot at me, and I guess I was the first person to do it, so everybody associates it with me. But then now, after I did it, a bunch of people do it now. A bunch of people get the fast nationals and report them out. But let me ask you this, like, putting out the fast nationals on a week where AEW is down, and so the numbers are lower than they usually are. Like a lot of people who are pro AEW, they hide the fast nationals. They don't want to put out the fast nationals. Hiding the fast nationals is every bit as quote unquote unethical as putting them out, because now you're hiding information. By looking at the fast nationals, whether if they're up or down, I can tell you exactly what AEW's rating is going to be. So this is useful information. It's not bullshit numbers. They're either like 7% higher, 7% lower, or sometimes it's different. But if you really study the fast nationals, you can tell, okay, so based on the fast nationals, the final number will do this. And that's why I put them out, because it's information that people can use.
Right. I love it. I love that. And how timely that you were set to come on the show on PWT podcast, and Tony Khan's taking shots, dude. And I don't know. That's sort of how I interpreted it too. I was like, oh, he's going for Alfred now. And see you all for the go home. And sometimes he'll tweet about the overrun just to sort of tack on to what you said. Like he tweets out like, oh, and there will be an overrun. It's like no one fucking cares. That's weird. Like that's cool to you because you're like a business insidery guy. And I don't know. We have some fan cope here. The only reason for AEW not being the biggest wrestling show in the world is WWE fans. At the end of the day, the only way for AEW to increase viewership is to increase the number of WWE fans who watch. There are no more wrestling fans in the pool other than WWE fans. And they won't watch because they're brainwashed. AEW, if they were to copy WWE to get their fans, would be scolded and still not watched by those fans for being a copy. The truth really is that WWE fans are the only reason AEW isn't the number one wrestling promotion right now. So I guess WWE fans are the reason AEW is dying. That's according to an AEW. That's
a pretty ridiculous comment. It's funny because like some of what he's saying is true, but that was always going to be the thing. Like WWE is going to be number one no matter what. So it's like saying, to borrow a phrase from Tony Khan, like the only reason Coke is the only reason Pepsi is number two is because of Coke. It's like, you know what I mean? Yes, exactly. But the thing is, he's right to the degree that when AEW was hot, it was because so many disillusioned WWE fans went to the product. And then when WWE got hot, there's only so much time in the week for wrestling. So that's a you problem. AEW's job is to make their product hot enough to where they can attract a WWE fan base. Where that person is wrong, where Phil Smith is absolutely wrong, is this idea that there's only people who only watch WWE. I could tell you firsthand that's bullshit. I go to GCW shows every single time they're in LA, and there are all kinds of people who do not watch WWE. And they watch, and they don't even watch AEW. They're just GCW hardcore fans, Yeah. And there's all kinds of, even when WWE was kind of slumping and there was no competition, that was when like WrestleMania week, there'd be all these wrestling shows, which you still see, but they would kind of latch on to a Bloodsport, to a ROH, or when it was not owned by Tony Khan. So there is a huge market for wrestling fans, and AEW can make all the excuses they want. We see the product, we see the problems, and I just think AEW needs to get his shit together. Easier said than done, but that's what they need to do.
No, absolutely. And I mean, we can just harp on it all day. Like, here's Bryan Alvarez coping about the Collision viewership, and he's like, it's the highest since September, 18 to 49 was the highest since February. And this is where I get pissed off, is that people will come and be like, oh, like I'll have Evil Dose on, and he's talking about numbers, and we're talking numbers and stuff, and people are like, why would you care about these sorts of things? And it's like, dude, because that's what they talk about. Like, that's what these people try. Like, they talk about the key demo, but then we go like, but the overall ratings fucking in the shits. And then that number doesn't matter, but this one matters. And it's always just goalpost shifty. Like, even Tony Khan there, he's talking about numbers. So I don't want to hear shit about oh, why do we talk about the numbers? Just enjoy wrestling. Like, I don't want to hear that shit. No, because when it's in your favor, you brag about it, as you rightfully so. And when it's not in your favor, you don't want to brag about it, rightfully so. But don't fucking tell me I can't focus on that shit. You know what I mean? It drives
100% correct. I was just thinking about this morning because you're right. Like, I remember a time when so it wasn't about total viewership. The first time AEW lost to WWE NXT in total viewers, then the excuse was, no, it's all about 18 to 49 because that's the number the advertisers like. And AEW is doing great in 18 to 49, right? And this morning, and then it became from that to total homes. The total homes are down. So considering the total homes, AEW is doing great. This morning, the goalpost has moved to where Dave Meltzer was saying, well, if you look at all the shows that are down, AEW is down the least of all these shows. They're only down 20%. Until eventually it's going to be, if you look at all the wrestling companies that have gone out of business, well, AEW went out of business gracefully. You know, they went out of business with a 5-star match. Nobody's done that.
So my God. Jesus.
The amount of twists and turns that they've had to do. 18 to 49 isn't even a thing. Like, they don't even say that word anymore because if you look at the 18 to 34, which is the main reason 18 to 49 is down, 18 to 34 has completely disappeared. And that's the scariest thing. That's the thing that the kids have stopped watching AEW. And it's very hard to get those kids back. Like, 18 to 34 has cratered. And I honestly think, I haven't heard this out there anywhere, and this is just my school of thought. And it's not, I've kind of followed the numbers and the pattern, and my gut tells me that when they started promoting that CM Punk brawl-in footage, I think there were those 18 to 34. Those are your casual fans. Those are the people who are not going to watch because they're reading dirt sheets. Those are just going to watch for the big stars. Yeah, those people probably thought CM Punk's coming back to AEW.
Yeah, 100%.
Went on, and as it became more and more obvious that CM Punk's not coming back to this company, he's with WWE. They just abandoned the product. Like, well, screw this. I'm not going to watch this big storyline if CM Punk's not going to actually be involved in it. It's, you know, it's like teasing that the final boss, The Rock, we're going to show footage, and then The Rock doesn't come back. Well, 18 to 34-year-olds are going to be over it.
Yeah, they're just like fuck this. And then also, like, we were talking about Tony, and he's spread too thin. I say it ad nauseum on the show. He's doing too much. He's in the sports world. He's trying to write all these wrestling shows. You were saying he needs to get his rounds in as a booker / promoter. I agree. That's what he should be doing in ROH, just booking that while he allows someone else to take control of AEW as far as like booking, creative, all of that. I've harped on this ad nauseum, but the biggest problem is you tweeted this out, and at This Is Nasty. Imagine explaining Ospreay and Omega's star rating feud to your girlfriend who doesn't watch pro wrestling. The breakup wouldn't come fast enough. And my whole thing is like, dude, every girl I've dated, they get forced to watch fucking wrestling. It's just that simple. And I don't know, man. Like, my girl trying to explain fucking AEW shit to her, it makes no goddamn sense. But she does like wrestling. She watches WWE, but when AEW's on, that's, you know, she just goes on her phone and tunes out. She doesn't understand why people are fighting a lot of the time and shit like that. And I just want to play your Time Cop Inception. It's my favorite movie. I'm gonna play a clip of you talking to us here. So let's watch this.
But imagine trying to explain a 5-star feud between Kenny Omega, Will Ospreay, and Dave Meltzer to your girlfriend. So there's this white, highly athletic wrestler from New Japan Pro Wrestling named Kenny Omega, and he's in a rivalry with this other white, highly athletic wrestler from New Japan Wrestling named Will Ospreay. And both
dude, it's exactly what it is, dude.
Wrestlers
it's so good.
Check pretty much the same boxes because they're mostly known for their wrestling ability with average charisma, no memorable promos, no seasoning, no grits, no collard greens, no sizzle, and zero relatability to anybody who doesn't appreciate the delicate nuances of the true sport of professional wrestling. And then there's this guy in his 60s from San Jose who grades matches based on a 5-star rating scale. And his grades have nothing to do with the build-up or storyline behind the match. It's only about the match itself and how hard these two oiled-up males can hit each other, how well executed their holds are, how many times they drop themselves on their heads, and being in the Tokyo Dome certainly helps too. Anyway, a 5-star match is considered a great match. And one day, Kenny Omega broke that scale by having a 7-star match. But now, Will Ospreay is considered the new Kenny Omega, and he just had a match that got 6.5 stars. No. Honey, wake up. Please, wake
up. Dude, I love this so much.
Wake up. Stay with me. Okay. So Ospreay had a 6.5-star rating recently, and Kenny Omega got jealous because Kenny's now saying that Kenny broke the Dave Meltzer star ratings to the point where Dave no longer knows what he's talking about. And to settle this internet beef, Kenny is going to get into a fake fight against Will Ospreay to try to fix the star rating system once and for all. That's so relatable, right, babe? Babe, wake up. Why did you fall asleep again? The story is so relatable. OMG, did I just bore you into a coma?
Oh, my God. And I guess, man, I guess that's the cold open for just the last little bit we're going to do here. It's Dave Meltzer's dumb moment of the week. So exactly, Dave has self-inserted himself.
Imagine trying to explain the 5-star feud between Kenny Omega, Will Ospreay.
Sorry, editing, Phil. But Dave has like inserted himself into this whole like Kenny Omega, Will Ospreay. They're working a feud, actually, like whatever. It's about me. And so just Dave Meltzer here tweets out, I guess he says, I was just at a movie theater, and when Reigns was on the screen, no reaction. Ask 100 people on the street. Hogan, Rock, Cena, and Rousey are the only ones half will know. So that's him basically coping, because this guy asked him, 100 people on the street who Dean Ambrose is, and I bet 80% will give you a blank stare. Roman Reigns is the guy. And then Dave just burying fucking Roman Reigns basically, and he's like, I just saw him at a movie theater. It was actually whatever. Batman, no reaction. So it's like, what the fuck does it like? Come on, Dave. Like, it's just there wasn't not no reaction, but he's not like a big movie star yet. But I don't know, just hating on Roman Reigns, dude. What do you make of that?
And this is also the bigger picture, and this is something Dave likes to do, is he'll take his 63-year-old life and like the one or two people he talks to about something, and then he'll envelop it into like that horrible sample size. He'll turn it into like, and this is what everybody thinks. So he'll just be like, I put it this way. I met this girl who, she's my friend's neighbor, and she was watching wrestling, and she saw Dean Ambrose, and she was like, wow, this Dean Ambrose guy's really cool. So Dean Ambrose is really, really big with women. Like, women love Dean. It's like, that's one woman. That's one woman that you talk to, Dave. So like, he goes to one movie theater and he's no reaction. And so I actually responded to that tweet, which I rarely do, but I just came up and I just thought it was so hilarious. And this is a true story, is that I was in a half-empty theater in Inglewood watching the Von Erich movie. And when MJF turned up, nobody did anything. And so I was just kind of using that to be like, it's such a bad sample size that who's to say what these reactions really are? Like, I was in a half-empty theater and nobody reacted to MJF. So that means that MJF is not over in Inglewood, which, as somebody who went to Inglewood, and it was the loudest I've ever heard any crowd for anybody during that shoot promo he cut against Tony Khan, which actually came back to bite the company. But like, he is over in Inglewood.
And I agree with you there. I was in a theater. I saw that. I was fortunate enough. I got to go like see the Iron Claw early. And there was like 9 people there, and fucking nobody knew who MJF was either, but he was in it for like a split second. Yeah. But so Dave Meltzer, we were talking about the demos and the numbers. So he's talking about this is AEW's concerning decline in 18 to 34 viewership over the last 4 weeks. Dave says the booking in this way didn't change for like Gotham weeks ago. Tony Khan did the thing with the neck brace at the NFL thing, and the thing with comparing to Weinstein and all that. But I can't believe that that's the reason. God, he's so offensive as a writer. It's like, dude, what the fuck? Now, obviously, this is him talking, but there's so many edit mistakes in his on actual like Wrestling Observer Figure 4 Online as well, where it's like, dude, get an editor.
He just stream of conscious. It's just run on sentences, and he says that he goes back and edits it, but he totally doesn't.
No, we call it out all the time here, folks. But Dave goes on to say, obviously they've been doing the Young Bucks storyline, and I don't think that's the reason, but perhaps that the ratings are declining, Dave. There's physical evidence of that being the case. Yeah. That is something that changed. That if there's anything that changed in the show, changed. I was saying it's not cool, and people were taking that all wrong and totally misinterpreting, as always, totally misinterpreting what I said. So Dave just stooged that whenever he says shit, people misinterpret what he fucking says. That's because you're a marble mouth Meltzer, okay?
Yes. Blame yourself. Like, learn how to put a sentence together and have some convictions behind some of your points. Make sure they're not so goddamn batshit. Like, don't blame people for, yes, you're going to get gaslit on Twitter. And here's the thing about Dave. We've lost Dave Meltzer. We lost him. I judge people a lot of times. I don't know if you because you might be the exception to this rule if you have a bunch of tweets. And I do know people who have a lot of tweets who aren't crazy. But if you have over 100,000 tweets, you have been lost to the Twitter matrix. Dave has 130,000 tweets. Damn. He spends all day responding to random trolls. He seeks validation from people he does not know. And like, of course your stuff is going to get misconstrued because he's probably at the point of his life where he's senile, speaking a different language because he's been sucked into the Twitter vortex.
I wonder how many tweets I have. I don't think 100,000. You know what I mean?
I don't think it's 100,000 at all.
Yeah, but he does, man, spend a lot of time doing that too. I'll do it about like maybe I'll give it like 30 to an hour a day of just arguing with some marks.
Dude, you only have 20,000 posts. That's my range. I got about 30 since 2009. I've had 30,000. Like, people think I'm always on Twitter because of the reaction that I get for a lot of stuff. My thing is like I like post and ghost. I just post things that I kind of go about my day, and like I post so that I can kind of bring attention to things. And so I can kind of maybe get an idea for some of my opinions that are really connecting for better or worse. And I could turn that into a bit, but I'm not on Twitter. Like, I do not think it's healthy to sit on Twitter all day.
No, I agree.
And like, Twitter is a fun place. I like Twitter, but that's because I'm not always on Twitter all day, every day. Like, reading what people say, getting in fights with people, like a tweet that's negative about me. Do what you want. Like, Twitter is a source. In the early days of Pro Wrestling Bits, I have Twitter to thank because it was Twitter and Forbes. I would put links to Pro Wrestling Bits in my Forbes articles, and I would tweet about it. And that's where 100% of my traffic came from, because YouTube was like, YouTube's not going to put your stuff out there if they don't think you're going to be around. Until you're around for years and until you've proven yourself, YouTube's going to ignore you largely. Yeah. And then once it started picking up steam, now YouTube has, been very good to me. But Twitter, I have nothing but good things to say about it. But that's because I'm not obsessed with Twitter.
Yeah, I like Twitter. Yes, for real, dude. I like it, man. I like Twitter. I like the discourse. I think it's funny. I get some of my best laughs from Twitter or X, whatever. And yeah, man, the YouTube grind. You're absolutely right about that. That's why I'm pretty blessed and fortunate too, because like I've been at it for like just over a year, and I'm getting like a pretty significant like YouTube following and stuff. And that's and I try to parlay it into X. Whenever I stir up the shit and I kind of put the bait out there, I'll just like post the link to my channel underneath.
Yeah. Yes.
That's sort of my game. That's the game I play with X. Like, I know I'm going to say something that's going to piss people off. Then I drop my link down there, and I don't give a fuck if you watch my videos and hate or like them. Just come watch them,
Absolutely.
But yeah,
that's the way you play the game. And I'd love to collab with you, by the way.
Let's do it. Oh, we should totally.
We could do dueling Meltzers. There's all kinds of things that we could do. I think.
Oh my god, yeah. We'll talk about that definitely, like off the pod, and we'll DM about that. But I just got this. Let's finish this one. Then I got one clip of Bryan Alvarez because he gets lumped into the Dave Meltzer dumb moment of the week, and then I'll get you out of here, my good friend. And I appreciate you so much. But Dave goes on to say the most important. It's a way to explain why one age group, the most important age group, is down significantly while everything else is not down at all. Are they turning some people off in every age group? A little, of course. You always do. Do the playoffs hurt? Of course they do. They always do. But this is more than that. Yeah, it's because people fucking hate the Bucks and Jack Perry, dude. If you haven't figured this out, it's pretty simple. So speaking of JD from NY, and this is the last bit that I wanted to play. Here is Bryan Alvarez saying the shit that, and JD's like, I've been saying this for months.
Oh, it's for like, months. Oh, congratulations for months. It's like, bro, and we're out here like, man, I've been saying this since 2022.
Yeah, me too, dude. It's like he blocked me for saying this shit. Yeah, exactly. I started Pro Wrestle Times as a Twitter account, I think in 2021 or something. Yeah. And and he blocked me like early on. He's one of the first dudes to fucking block me just for like speaking honestly about AEW. Now you look, he unblocked me all of a sudden. So you see him here, and he's saying for months. I'm like, dude, what the fuck? There's been a bunch of us saying this forever. You guys are just catching up. And the worst part is how Bryan Alvarez and Dave Meltzer are such schmarmy pricks about, like, they come to these realizations sort of, and then they speak them like, oh, and I'll say it and everyone will get mad and blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, dude, that's what has been happening to me for the last year since I started my fucking podcast. Like, exactly. It's like, dude, where you guys, they're in such a fucking bubble. Everyone exists in bubbles. Sometimes you exist in multiple bubbles, right? And then sometimes bubbles overlap. But like, Dave and these dudes are just, I don't know. I feel like Dave really thinks that what he thinks really influences wrestling. And as long as Tony Khan's running AEW, it truly does in a way. But either way, here's Alvarez speaking some truth for once.
But where is a thread that connects all of these shows, that makes you want to tune into the next show? The big cliffhanger to lead you to Collision. A Dynamite cliffhanger leads you to the next Dynamite, or a Dynamite 3 weeks down the road. It doesn't lead you to Collision. A Collision cliffhanger doesn't lead you to Dynamite. It's like,
this is, I swear to God, dude, so I go live every Wednesday and Saturday, and we watch Collision and Dynamite. Like, I watch it with the viewers and the listeners.
Yeah.
And I swear there's people in my chat who I have got to watch AEW who wouldn't even be otherwise watching it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And they groan through it and shit. But we talk about this all the time. We're like, you can't do I've been saying this for months, years, dude. You can't do Dynamite shit. I know Collision's only been around for like a year, but it's like you can't do Dynamite shit. And then the way they pitched Collision was it's like it's its own show. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're doing Dynamite. What's the first thing the Bucks did? Okay, sorry, I'm all over the place, but what's the first thing the Bucks did? No, you're right.
I completely agree.
They took a victory lap and then they started blending Dynamite shit in with Collision and fucking ruined Collision. So it's like, you know, Brian, you're saying this now, and Meltzer's this guy where it's like, you know, you tell him, we don't know there's going to be an overrun, Dave. Dave's like, well, I did. They told me. You know, I called him on the phone.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, Dave, not everyone can do that. Call Tony on the phone and tell him to not do Collision shit on Dynamite, bro. Like, or whatever, vice versa. Because none of these stories, that's why people go, where's the story? And then everybody's like, well, there is a story. Don't you pay attention? It's like, no, because no one watches fucking Rampage. So don't progress any story from Dynamite if that's the only show anyone's watching. And now nobody's watching that. And it's eventually just going to turn into Collision as well. And it's sad, but yeah, I don't know, man.
Yeah, well, I think Collision is above Rampage, and Rampage is going to be Rampage has turned into dark, and it's just a bad brand. If you look at the ratings pattern for even if it follows Dynamite, people just do not fuck with Rampage. It's just this cold show.
It's ass, dude. It's the one show where I'm like, if I miss it, I don't care.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
There's so many things going wrong here in the middle of everything's okay. Does that make sense? Am I the only one? Does anybody?
Am I the only one? Yeah, just me and Alfred and everyone else standing over here going, what the fuck?
There's a whole Twitter sphere of people who have been saying this, and you've had blinders on.
Yeah, dude. Dave blocked me just for saying this.
You know what I'm talking about here?
No, I get it. Yes. When a match and a good show ends, you should be not just that was a good match, but also I can't wait to see what happens.
Yeah, what's next?
And the two questions you almost never ask about AEW matches are what happens next? And I don't know if it's a question, but man, that was a satisfying payoff to a long-term storyline or an exciting chapter in the storyline or something. Stuff just happens.
Yes, when every
stuff just happens. That's what I've been saying. You guys want to get mad at me? Yeah.
Yeah, this professional wrestling is, I mean, here's how long that this has been a talking point on my channel is that when I was talking about the Jericho Appreciation Society, the funny thing about the Jericho Appreciation Society is they're supposed to be heels. Why are they heels? Because they do sports entertainment in this pro wrestling company. Ooh, bad sports entertainers. But do you know what happened with the Jericho Appreciation Society? They all got over as baby faces for the sports entertainment they were doing.
Yeah, man.
They proved inadvertently that sports entertainment trumps pro wrestling, even in a pro wrestling company. Chris Jericho got over for doing the Ocho. Jack Hager got over for his hat gimmick, which was hilarious. Yeah. Daniel Garcia, that's when he started his dance, which essentially saved his career. They all got over by doing these little sports entertainment things, even though that was supposed to get them heat as heels. But it's like, no matter what company you're in North America, people want to see entertainment just as much, if not more, as wrestling.
Yeah, exactly, man. That's where AEW fucked up. They should have been sports-based entertainment.
Yes.
That's what it should have been.
Like they have all this wrestling. But, again, as we said earlier, in this day and age, all wrestling is great. Like the bottle of Vince is gone. All wrestling is great. You got to have something else that differentiates yourself.
Exactly.
Show is a great self-contained show. There's no incentive to watch another show unless you just want to watch great wrestling that night. Could you have skipped this Collision and missed nothing?
Yeah, so man, just pretty much saying what we've been saying. And I mean, that wraps up this segment called Dave Meltzer, Wrestling Observer Dumb Moment of the Week.
It's got to be hard to choose just one.
What's that?
It's got to be hard to choose just one. Like that's
no, dude. Tony Khan and Bryan both get lumped into that a lot together. So I mean, it's just part of it. And yeah, but man, Alfred, I've stolen so much of your time. I appreciate you so much for it. Oh yeah, this is great. It's really great. Make sure you have a soda water, pack a lunch if you're doing PWT. But dude, I just appreciate you coming through. We definitely have to collab. I would love to come do some content for you. You have an open door here, or with you rather, as well, for your channel. And you have an open door here anytime, man. Anytime I do a live show too, you're welcome to pop in, cut a promo, leave, stay around and chill with us for a long time. Or if you ever just want to hop on and just do the show so we can shoot the shit some more, you're welcome absolutely anytime. Why don't you let the good folks, the good PWT listeners, know what you have going on and where they can find you?
Absolutely. And thank you. This has been so much fun. Find me on Twitter at This Is Nasty, Pro Wrestling Bits on YouTube, youtube.com/Pro Wrestling Bits. We're at 20,000 now. We're looking at 50,000. Going to have a lot of content coming out tomorrow. I'm going to drop a video that it's going to be different, and it's going to be out there, and it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to the reaction that gets. And then there's also going to be a surprise documentary that we are dropping that is out of this world, and I can't wait till it drops. Obviously, it's a surprise. I can't tell you when it's going to drop, but subscribe and tune in for that. We've got a lot of content that's going to be really great over the next month or so. So I really can't wait for people to see this. Phil is going to be on Pro Wrestling Bits on some form of faction. We're going to collab somehow. So all you fans of Phil Marks definitely want to subscribe here. So yeah, follow me on Forbes, Twitter, Pro Wrestling Bits. And this has been a great time, man.
Man, I couldn't agree more. Round of applause, everyone, for Alfred.
All 27 people are still there. These are real people.
Yes, and I don't know if you said it, but at This Is Nasty on X, just a tremendous follow. You guys know where to find me at Pro Wrestle Times, at Pro Wrestle Clips. You're probably already there listening to me now, so thank you all so much for tuning in to another eclectic edition of PWT Podcast. And we'll see you in the Upside Down. Peace.